All right, well, here's a few news articles that might be interesting. And remember, this class is more, someone filed impeachment. Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, the crazy QAnon woman said she would file to impeach Biden. Anyway, but it won't go anywhere because not enough people will support it, I think. But that is, I mean, this class is the management part, which really is politics. It's like the Game of Thrones. So Fox has been really facing quite a challenge here, and it's a real business challenge. I mean, do they want to? They were sticking with Trump. They were 100% behind Trump, and then after the election, when it was clear that Trump had lost, Rupert Murdoch contacted the people and told them, we're not sticking with Trump anymore. Just to get Trump to knock it off, because the businesses were happy enough with everything the Republicans did, like denying that the virus exists and stuff. That was all good for business, but an insurrection overthrowing the government was not good for business. So they told him, knock it off. And now they seem to be reversing that. Now they seem to have just decided that this is, I think, the huge problem. That's why I heard an analysis of what's happening to Mitch McConnell now. Right now, Mitch McConnell has also tried to throw Trump under the bus, said Trump probably should be impeached. I'm glad you're doing it, because he would like the Republican Party to return back to a sane position so they can get corporate money. The corporations are all cutting off money to the Republicans that supported the coup and supported overthrowing the election, because that's bad for business. But 80% of the small donors, the individual voters, still love Trump, and they still love overthrowing the government and ending democracy. So Trump has broken the Republican Party, and now they don't know what to do, because they need to get both the corporate donations and the small donations, and those two can't both be satisfied. So Fox's new attempt is to just quit pretending to have news at all, get rid of all the real journalists, and just have commentary. And those will be the pro-Trump guys. So, they tried to sway against Trump, and they seem to have decided that they can't sustain that. So they're swinging back. And this, I think, is, the big issue in America is how long are we going to have an anti-truth political movement that just publishes fake news shows and people just believe total lies? And I think the most logical people I've read have said that this will eventually stop because of corporate money. The fact is, the corporations are connected to reality, and the voters apparently aren't, but the corporations will not make money without some connection to reality, and that will eventually drag them back. So we'll see. But anyway, what I thought is the corporate advertisers would drag the TV shows back to reality, and then the TV shows would program the Trump viewers or people who watch TV to go back to reality. But the immediate move right now is the opposite. The TV is going to move back away from reality. So anyway, we'll see what happens. I see some comments here. United States Delivery Services has a hiring push, including InfoSec. What is United States Delivery Services? The post office?
Digital services. My inability to type
Digital
really
service. Oh, I saw this. Yes, I saw it. But the reason why I didn't post it is because you have to live in Washington, D.C. But if anybody here wants to be in Washington, D.C., it would be fine. They said right now it's remote, but during normal times, you'll have to make Washington, D.C. your base. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, but it's true. I'm glad you put the link there. That's cool. Yeah. Well, OAN and another one, Newsmax or something, are the super right-wing ones. And they only exist because Fox tried to return to being sort of a more normal news agency and stop lying so much. And now they seem to have given that up as not profitable. Anyway, so this is the QAnon threat, but it's an internal terrorist problem in America. And, it seems to me like America's going to be like Europe. In Europe, I've heard people say if you're in London and you try to drive to work frequently, you can't go through the tube because some terrorist has set off a bomb there. And you just accept that you have a permanent presence in your culture of an angry subset that just keeps setting off bombs and shooting people and freaking out because they just want to tear down your society. And it looks like we're no longer any different than that here in America either. We're just going to have that simmering angry mob. And I don't think anybody has any realistic plan to do anything about it. So anyway, here we are, CNIT 125, which is here. And All right, so there is no hands-on projects in this class, and it is not a technical class. This is a management class. It is also the most important certification you can get to be an information security professional. Everybody expects you to have it. The hardcore hands-on pen tester types are always very frustrated by this because it's got nothing to do with hands-on anything. It doesn't involve learning how to do anything on computers. It's all about just understanding the concepts so you can be the manager assigning who's going to work on that and making strategic decisions. But it is really important in the business. So let me just mute these people. All right, so anyway, all right, so you can get a free textbook up here. And so we're just going to prepare for the CISSP exam. We're taking one of the books for it. That is the point of this. It's a straight exam prep course. So we're going to cover the topics. The CISSP is greatly feared because a lot of people take it starting with like an MBA, a business degree, and then they have to learn all of Net Plus and all of Security Plus. If you come from the technical side, it's much easier. You probably already know Net Plus and Security Plus. If you don't, I recommend taking those courses before this one. And all you have to learn now is about one course worth of management. But everything is a mile wide and an inch deep. You don't actually go into any depth in anything. You just have to recognize the terms and like one sentence about what they mean for all these things. All right, so there's quizzes. They're online in the Canvas system. There's a City College Canvas system for City College students. If you're not a City College student, you click this link here and you can join my open Canvas server that anybody can join. This course covered the changes that are going to affect May 1. No, this is the older version. The next version will not be in this class, might be in a later one. However, I do know from the past updates that the updates never actually change anything. It is ridiculous. I've been through 2 generations of these updates and it never changed really anything at all. This stuff doesn't change much. But yeah, there's a new version coming out, but it's not out yet. Anyway, they add IoT. Yeah, they might. Are there discounts for the test? No. As far as I know, there is no discount you can get anywhere for the test. It really costs like $650 or something. Pretty gruesome. So anyway, in this class, there's online quizzes and you have to make presentations and write papers. And so that's, and there's a discussion board where you contribute every week and that's it. We just talk about security here. You don't actually do anything hands-on. That's the other courses. So let me just talk about the CSSP certification and then we'll start the first chapter. So that is here and I should have this one. All right, so here's the CISSP certification stuff. And let me see if I can trick this program into making it bigger. View. I might be able to use full screen. We'll see what happens. All right, so we're going to just review the security terms and concepts. There'll be student presentations and student papers just to go over this material. And that's it. So the main website is here at samsclass.info. That's where the timetable is and all that, but it's also in Canvas. We try to keep the two synchronized. And so there are a lot of certifications you need if you want to work in this field, but the number one that everyone needs is CISSP. It's greatly respected. Everyone expects you to have it, even if you're a hands-on consultant, because it means in the first place, you have to maintain certain ethical standards or you lose it. So it's sort of like a license to practice law or license to practice medicine. And also it means that you understand what management does and how to talk to management. And whatever you do have to talk to management. And this is, I think, the huge problem in information security is you have a lot of technical people who tend to be on the autistic spectrum, sort of antisocial, unemotional, constantly finding little holes and picking on things. And then you have management that just sort of want to, think in vague generalities and go to meetings and get drunk and stuff. And they too typically cannot communicate well. The technical people are spouting gobbledygook about binary. The management can't understand them. And technical people feel like the management are idiots. The management feel like the technical people are crazy. And that's unhealthy. That doesn't work. They need to be able to communicate with each other. And the idea is if people have a CISSP, then they can talk each other's languages. The management has to learn some technical terms and the technical people have to learn some management terms. So that's the idea. Anyway, so it is, people get paid a lot more with the CISSP. It's how you move up into management. It is definitely a big step forward in your career to get it. And so why is this thing not moving? All right. All right. So a lot of government information assurance employees are required to have it. And, it's globally recognized. It's very famous. I know a guy that has 25 certifications, and the only thing he puts on his business card is CISSP. It is the only one anybody really cares about. It's the only one I maintain. All my others, I let them expire, but I maintain my CISSP. I just paid for it again this year. It is the one that opens doors. All right, so you got to have 5 years of experience in information security, or I think you can get 1 year knocked off for things like a bachelor's degree or a Security Plus or something. It's $700 now. And anyway, it's a 3-hour exam, and that's the joy of it. And this thing is still not moving. Up, down, okay. All right, I've seen this happen before. The stupid full screen doesn't work right. Let me go here. All right, so, all right. If you don't have the experience, but you pass the test, you can become an associate of ISC squared. This is what I was for 6 years. You pass the test, you can put this on. Now you have 6 years to gain the experience, and then you can become a CISSP by proving that you have the experience. That is one option. And there's also something called an SSCP, which is about half of a CISSP. I didn't get that, but you could do that on the way up. I'm not sure how much use that is. I know Cisco is the same. There's a cert half the way up to the one most people get. And there's a lot of others out there, cloud security and other ones, and I'm not sure about how valuable those other ones are. The CISSP is by far the most famous and most valuable of these. How strict are they on the 5 years for a non-associate? You have to be sponsored by a CISSP to get the CISSP certification, and the person who sponsors you is required to verify your resume. So when I do it, and I've done it for a lot of people, I have to have somebody I can contact at your previous company that will verify how many years you worked there and like your job title. So, and if your sponsor were to let you in without you having the experience, and then this came out, your sponsor could lose their certification. It's a violation of the ethics for me to let other people in without the experience. So that's pretty strict, I think. However, it is pretty flexible on whether your experience is security experience. If you have any kind of IT related job or a physical security guard job, those will count. You have to have something that has a security angle to it. Military experience should definitely count, sure. That should count just fine. Yeah, any kind of full-time job that fits in the 8 categories that we'll see. Anyway, there's also something called the CISSP Plus, which is some kind of CompTIA attempt to compete with the CISSP, again, halfway up. They wanted me to teach a class in that, and I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to teach the CISSP instead, but more and more teachers are doing this. But I think you'll see the CISSP is not out of reach for community college level students. There's no reason to settle for anything less. These inferior certs, I think, are a waste of your time. Anyway, now the good ones to get from CompTIA are A+, Security Plus, and Network Plus. Those are all good, but the CISSP is much more valuable than them. And Pen Test Plus is new, but it looks pretty good. Anyway, so the CISSP has a code of ethics, and here's it. You are protecting society and infrastructure. You're not some kind of rebel trying to tear everything down. You get a CISSP because you want to get a job being like a corporate security officer, so you can't be like, a communist that thinks there shouldn't exist any corporations or something. That would be a contradiction in terms. Then the same thing for any kind of business. Provide diligent and competent service, act honorably, justly, legally. You just, the same thing a contractor that builds a house would. You have to not lie about your credentials, not try to do a job you're not qualified to do, deliver on time, don't overcharge people, don't provide shoddy service, the usual stuff. And advance and protect the profession. You have to do something to help the other people along, like give talks at conferences. You have to help beginners along, teach classes, join clubs, that sort of thing. All right, so the exam is extremely irritating. It is the most difficult exam I've seen, not because the questions are written in a maximally confusing way. The questions are written as if written by a manager that doesn't even quite understand what he's talking about. And after all these years, that seems to be intentional. They're like deliberately fuzzy and vague and confusing. So instead of being like a technical exam where they ask you a simple question like how many IP addresses are there in a /22 subnet, and there's just one right answer and the others are wrong, you'll ask you a question that's hard to understand, and there'll be 4 answers and they're all wrong. And you have to choose the one that is the least stupid of the stupid answers. So you really need a practice test. These questions are screwy. So you really need to get a practice test so you get used to the weird way they write these questions. So this class is not enough to prepare you. Before I take any cert exam, I always go through the material twice. So what I recommend is take this class and then go through a good practice exam. Like the transgender practice exam is by far the best. That will present you with very good questions that are very much like the real questions, although not literally stolen questions, but it really does prepare you for what you're going to see. A transgender, it's Kaplan, and it's very good. It's the most expensive and the best practice test. I use it for all the certification exams, and I highly recommend it. Anyway, and there are some blogs here about it. But anyway, it's written in ways to make it very difficult. All right. So you might want to think about obtaining a practice exam. You'll find transgender is here at kaplantraining.com. If you just Google transgender, you can find it. And when I did it, it was $99 for like a 1 month online access, and that was all I needed. But anyway, that's a summary of the CISSP. And if anybody, by the way, has come to add the class, I already added all the people on the waiting list. If anybody else wants to add, just do it online and I'll approve it. And what I'm going to do now, I think, is just start with the first chapter. Actually, see, it's 6:53. Yeah, we've only been here for half an hour. Yeah, let's do some of this. We'll see how far we get. We're going to do part of this chapter this week and part of it next week. So let me make this as big as it's going to get. And I guess that'll do. All right, and this is really pretty much Security Plus stuff. A lot of this is stuff you hopefully have seen before. If not, you'll have to learn quite a bit. Do you need to maintain the cert while you're an associate? Yes, you do. But it's a smaller price. It's like $25 a year or something, probably more now. It's a lower price and lower number of years of continuing education. But you do have to prove continuing education every year and also pay a fee every year to maintain it. Yeah. All right, so here's we're in this first chapter, which we're going to do maybe half of today. There's security terms, compliance, security documentation, and then some business terms, business continuity, personnel policies, risk management concepts, the supply chain, and so on. So the first thing is basic security terms. And of course, the number one thing in security is the CIA. This is the fundamental concept. There are 3 things you need when you say something is secure. What does that mean? It means that you have an appropriate amount of these 3 things: confidentiality, availability, and integrity. There are 3 desirable features, and you have to have an acceptable level of these 3 things, or you don't have security. And security is when you don't have to worry about attacks very much, and you can get your job done. So the opposite is here. The opposite of confidentiality is disclosure. The opposite of availability is destruction. So whatever you're trying to get at is not there. And the opposite of integrity is alteration. Somebody is allowed to modify things they shouldn't be able to modify. So confidentiality keeps data secret, so unauthorized people cannot read it. So this is for credit cards, passwords, customer personally identifiable information like addresses, health information, and so on. It's a fundamental concept. This is the first thing anyone ever thought of security, was preventing unauthorized people from seeing it. That's confidentiality. People should only see it if they have authorization to see it. And in military terms, that's clearance, like top secret or secret, and then access approval, and then a need to know. And all of this was basically defined by the military, and all the corporate side is just imitating the military, basically. So integrity makes sure that nobody is modifying data who is not authorized to modify the data. So your web designer should be modifying the website, but other people should not be modifying the website. So you prevent unauthorized people from making modifications, you prevent people from making mistakes, and you maintain consistency so that things don't get contradictory. Like somebody pointed out, my website said Thursday on one part and Monday on the other part. That's a failure of consistency. You could see that as a failure of integrity. So you have access controls to limit who can get at files and folders, and authentication so you know who people are, intrusion detection systems so you notice if there's suspicious activity on a network, you log things, and there are other controls like object integrity, encryption, and hashing, validating them. And there are attacks, viruses, logic bombs, errors, malicious hackers changing things, people using backdoors. These are all things that intrude on your system and do unauthorized things to it. And the third part is availability. When your authorized users try to use your assets the way they are intended, are they there? Do they work? So to protect this, you have to find single points of failure. Don't have just one router, just one firewall, just one web host, this sort of thing, and prevent attacks like denial of service attacks that just render your object unavailable for authorized users. So here's the threats. Things can break, software can break. You can have fires and floods or denial of service attacks over the internet, or human errors, just making mistakes. All these can cause your assets to become unavailable. So you have controls. You can have proxies like Cloudflare is a proxy on your website so that it handles high amounts of traffic that would overwhelm your web server. They make copies of your web page and hand it out from their servers that are very powerful. So that keeps your website up. And access controls limit who can get at it. You can monitor performance, have backup systems and redundancy, and plans of how to handle disasters. And you can have fault-tolerant systems, which are the systems designed with built-in alternatives so that if one device fails, another will take over and it remains available, like a RAID array. One disk can fail and the other disks take over the work, and you don't have downtime. So these three things, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, none of them can ever be perfect. And if you increase one, you decrease the others. So you have to make an adjustment at whatever. For example, increasing confidentiality would typically mean more longer passwords, encrypting things, having more checks to make sure you're really authorized before you do something. And all that lowers availability. Now, your authorized users are going to more often be unable to do their work because they forgot their ID card, they forgot their password, or whatever. The more you lock down the confidentiality, you pay for that with lowered availability. And they're all like that. Auditing is measuring something about a device to see how well it's working, and accounting is keeping a log of who's been doing what on your system. These are not as fundamental as the CIA triad, but these are other desirable security properties, security activities. So here's 5 elements. Identification is when you claim to be somebody. Authentication is proving that you're that person, for example, by having a thumbprint or a password. Then after you've proven who you are, authorization is comparing that to some kind of access control list to decide whether you are allowed to do something. Are you allowed to enter this folder or enter this room or something? Auditing records a log of what you've done, and accounting reviews logs to measure what people have done and see if what they have done conforms with your security policy or not. And there are AAA services which date back to the phone network. These are the systems used to do your phone bill. They authenticate people so you know who they are and you know they are authorized to, compares their authorization to make sure they are allowed to be on the network, and then keeps accounting of what they've done so you can make their phone bill. And this applies to all other systems as well. They call them AAA services, and you need them on any kind of secure system. And so here's, for example, accounting. This Octomom was a woman that had 8 kids. And when she went to the hospital, 15 workers that were not authorized looked at her medical records just to sort of tweet about it and blog about it and brag about how they'd seen it. And they were caught and fired because that violates HIPAA regulations. That's why you have accounting. You keep track of who's doing what on your system to make sure they aren't doing the bad thing. And then you can punish them. So I've got some Kahoots. These are just online quizzes, which hopefully keep people from falling asleep so much. They're worth extra credit if you get the most right in the top 3. So let me get to my login. Oh, it's already logged in up here, pardon me. All right, so here it is. And CNIT 1A is here. So So open a browser or another tab and go to kahoot.it and put in that number. And you can participate in this quiz. You don't have to do it. It's just extra credit, but you know, it tends to keep people from falling asleep. All right, this is CNIT 125. All right, good. I got 31 people, so we could get up to 30 here. WeGo is, I thought it might be like the Parler type site, but I think it isn't. Anyway, that was MeWe or something. Anyway. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. Yep, some people still coming. Good. All right, I guess that's it. Okay, a hacker defaces your homepage. What has gone wrong? Okay, that's integrity. They have modified something that they're not authorized to modify. All right. And so Kahoot grades you both on whether you're right and how quickly you answer. So you can get up to 1,000 points for each question. So see, somebody was very fast here and got 960. Anyway, I think I have to shrink it a bit to see my button. There we are. All right, whoops. All right, there. So what aspect of security does fault-tolerant systems improve? They give you availability. Fault-tolerant systems can have a fault without it proceeding to a failure. A fault is when something breaks, and a failure is when users no longer get service. So a fault-tolerant system can withstand a fault, but not have a failure. All right, what's the purpose of a username? Okay, that's your identification. It's not authentication. That would be proving. A username simply claims to be somebody. All right. All right, if there are errors in data entry, what has gone wrong here? All right, that's a failure of integrity. Your data is not accurate. All right, and what is an access control list used for? All right, that's authorization. Once you know who somebody is, are they allowed to do something? All right, so let's see. CT will have to tell me their name if they want to get their points. Mateo's a real name. That's good. And
Sam, this is Glenn. I was having trouble with the screen. It showed the icons, but it never showed any of the questions.
That's right. The questions only appear in my shared Zoom.
Okay.
You have to find the matching icon and click it. That's good.
All right.
Yeah. And
User error. So.
no, that's fine. That everyone has to learn how to do these Kahoots. They're not entirely obvious. All right. Good. The screen is not right. That's right. Glenn put it there. Good. All right. Good. And you're doing the right thing. Let me know if you have troubles.
Thank you.
All right. Sure. All right. So let's do a little more of this stuff. So there's other desirable security features. Non-repudiation means you cannot deny what you've done. So this is like signing a home loan. You agree to make some payments or they'll take your house. And then later when you don't make the payments, you might want to try to say you didn't sign that. But the point is, because you signed it, you cannot deny the action you took. Least privilege means people should only have the privileges they need to do their jobs. You don't just give everybody administrator on their computer. You give them lower privileges so they cannot make as serious mistakes. And need to know is a horizontal control, whereas least privilege is typically a vertical control, moving up towards administrator. This is where you would only have access to the area that you need to have access to. All right, and that makes more sense in sort of a military environment where if you are, for example, working on Russia, then you would not be authorized for information about China because you're not working on China, and so you don't have a need to know that. So the need to know was a big issue in the United States intelligence agencies. In the 1990s, they had information silos, so there were strict need to know rules. And that meant that people only knew a small portion of things. So when they had the 9/11 attacks, they said that was what caused us to be unready for them, because some people in one silo had part of it and other people in another silo had part of it, but nobody had access to all of it to put together the pieces and see it coming. So they took down the silos in response to the 9/11 attack. And then they had Bradley Manning, who was a private, who now was able to access all kinds of data that he didn't really need to know, and then he leaked it all. And so you had another disaster. So this is the problem, and that's what I mean about the CIA triad. There's no perfect world of security. Everything has a cost. So you have to constantly be adjusting it and balancing it, trying to meet the needs of your company. So subject is an active entity that tries to do something, like a user that tries to open a folder, and an object is the thing they're trying to get at. All right, Internet Explorer, for example, if you're running in memory, accessing a website, it's a subject. If it's a file sitting on the disk, then that's an object. And many things, it's a matter of context. They are an object when something is trying to access them, and they're a subject when they're trying to access something else. Defense in depth is an essential way to make things secure these days, because you never really know what you can trust. So you have to have multiple defenses. So you might have a Palo Alto firewall protecting your whole company, and then you also run a software firewall on every workstation. So you have two firewalls, so that something that slips past one might be caught by the other. Due care is doing what a reasonable person would do. So you don't do ridiculously stupid things. You do what a prudent person would do. And that's the concept of having due care. Due diligence is having management that enforces due care, where they check to see, is our staff doing reasonable things, or are they making stupid mistakes? All right. Gross negligence is what happens if you don't have due care. You have done something ridiculous. You just left the vault unlocked and went home, and then somebody stole the money. Well, that's gross negligence. You have not taken reasonable precautions that you should have been expected to take. And so now you have failed to do that, and we will be mad at you. And we'll also be mad at your manager, saying, why do you let your employees do these grossly negligent things and not supervise them and prevent them? And so legal consequences will depend on whether you committed gross negligence or not. For example, if you do reasonably secure your network and have a firewall and update your stuff and have antivirus running, and then somebody hacks you, you can argue that it's not really your fault as much. There'll still be some consequences, but you will not be guilty of gross negligence. All right. Another big concept is abstraction. You could assign individual permissions to every user on your network, but that would drive you mad. Instead, you group things into groups like administrators, sales, help desk, and the same for all your other objects. You sort them into categories and then assign controls to the categories. There's also data hiding. You can have data inside some container and people can see the outside of the container, but not the inside. So this is often the case where subjects at a low classification level can see that something exists, but they can't get in. And we'll talk a lot more about that later with databases, various ways you handle multiple layers of security in a database. And you know, encryption scrambles something so that unauthorized people cannot read it, because only authorized people have access to the key. At least that's the goal of encryption. It doesn't always work, but that's the goal. So let's take a look at another one of these cahoots, which is 1B. All right. All right, there's the pin. All right. Give it a few more seconds. All right. All right. So why don't sales have administrative rights? That's least privilege. Good. All right. All right. Why do you use a ladder instead of just climbing on the desks? That's due care, doing things the smart way. All right. Janitors leave slippery slope on the floor. Now what's happened? All right, that's gross negligence. All right. And Joe uses a printer. So what's the printer? Okay, and that's Joe's the subject and the printer is the object. Those two are the same. There's little defects in these. Should fire whoever wrote them anyway. 3 is Joseph. You might have to give me more information to get your points. S squared, I know who that is. And Mateo, I know who that is. Good. All right. All right. And I see Joseph has told me who he is. Good. All right. Good. All right. Let's get rid of that. All right. And I think at 7:15, good. We can do one more, which is what I had planned. So security governance. Get a little bit into the management now. So these are practices that define your security efforts, and the goal is to maintain your business processes. So sometimes your security management decisions are enforced from without. You have regulatory compliance if you're in a regulated industry like banking or health. There may be standard industry practices and guidelines for your industry, and there may be licenses you have to have and license requirements. So your principles have to be assessed and verified. And so you've got a security function. You want to align it to strategy, goals, mission, and objectives. These are all different levels of the direction your company is going. So you have to make a business case for your security planning. And this, by the way, is one big problem with security and why compliance is so helpful. If you make a normal business case, like you say, we should open a new office in this new town, and we should like hire a bunch of staff and advertise that office, they will make you have a business case saying, well, how much will that cost? And how much profit will it bring in? And how do you convince me that it's going to make more money than it costs? And that would justify it. And then you can define the return on investment. We invested this much money, we expect this much profit. But security just seems like a waste. You want to train our staff to use a more complicated thing, make everybody have longer passwords, buy this expensive firewall, and the end result is no more profit. We still sell the same product. We still sell the same number of products after that. You're just wasting our money. So security people have real trouble justifying their security expenses. From the viewpoint of management, it's just a loss. And so one thing that helps is compliance regulations, where they say, well, they passed a law and we have to do this. That's one way to do it. The other is to try to scare people and say, oh, if you don't do it, we'll get hacked and that'll cost a lot of money. But it's not really that simple. Anyway, so justifying the expense of security things is always a challenge in this business. Although it helps when everybody gets hacked all the time and all the headlines are about breaches and hacks, that helps motivate management to spend some money on security. So the chief security officer is the leader of the information security team, and they have to have a high level. They have the C at the start of their title. They're up at the level of the chief executive officer and so on, because you have to spend money on security and you have to have somebody at the top to be a champion to justify it. So here you have these levels of plans. You'll have a strategic plan, like a 5-year plan, and then you have little tactical plans for, say, every year inside there, and then little operational plans for things you do. These are the levels of your planning. For example, Google is famous for this. Google will open a new thing like Google Cloud, and they will say, all right, in 5 years, we are going to be one of the top 3 cloud providers, or we're going to just turn it off and go home. They frequently start something, launch it, it runs for a while, and then they say, all right, this is worthless, and just turn it off. They're famous for that. So they have a long-term plan, and they'll decide here whether it's a failure or not. Anyway, so their strategic plan is there. And then you have a tactical plan with projects and hiring and budget. And then you have the operational plan with all the details to make it work, all the resources and staffing and step-by-step procedures to accomplish each little thing, the little pieces which have to be put back together to accomplish the longer-term goal. One of the things is change control. You have to change things, like you're going to update all the desktops to a new operating system and such. Yeah, somebody put up a link for like killed by Google. Yeah, there's a famous ton of projects that Google killed. Anyway, so you have, if you want to do any change, like update all the machines to a different version of Windows or something, then you plan it, you test it, and you have change control. You don't just do it and then cause a disaster. You have a plan of when you're going to do it. You implement it, you have a plan of how to roll back to the old one if it turns out that the new one doesn't work and you can't fix it in a reasonable amount of time, which happens a lot. One thing that happens all the time, it happens frequently at the college, a vendor says, oh, buy our new product. It'll be so much better than the one you're using. And when you install it, it totally doesn't work. And now you've got nothing. So proper change control and management is where you don't let a disaster come from that. If you want to put in anything new, you say, all right, we're going to start on Friday. We're going to work through the weekend. If the new thing is not working by like Sunday morning, we'll use all day Sunday to go back to the previous one. And any way you do it, when Monday comes, we'll have something working. That's when you have proper change control and management happening. And it's required for this European standard of ITsec classifications, which we're going to talk a lot more about later. You have to have a change control and management system to meet the higher levels of security in that system. All right, so you have a change control process, you implement the change, you have a formalized testing product to see if your stuff is still working after the change. You have a rollback plan to go back if the change fails the test. You inform users, you inform your help desk so they know what to tell people. And then you have a change approval board to decide if this is okay. That's what you do. That's why you can't just turn on something new. Facebook got very upset about this. In normal businesses, it's very frustrating. You have a great idea, you have to submit it to the change approval board and wait 2 months, and then they'll say no. And you're like, I hate working here. Facebook says, move fast and break things. They don't do any of this. They're proud of this. You can do anything you want. Just race forward. They don't care if you break things. They want to always have the newest, most exciting feature as fast as possible. That is the opposite of this kind of management, and they're very proud of that. But most companies do not have that attitude. Then you have data classification, which again is obviously thinking from the military. You have to define how important data is to you. How useful is it? How much would it hurt you if it was disclosed? Does it affect national security if it was disclosed? So you determine which data, what security level it has, and then who should be allowed to get at it, how you're going to maintain its security level, how you're going to monitor who's using it, and how you're going to store it, and how you're going to dispose of it. When you're done using it, you have to consider all these things. So for a data classification scheme, you have a custodian, you have a criteria to evaluate the data, you label everything, document exceptions, put in controls to limit who does what with the data. I remember I worked in a financial industry. I was an escrow agency, and they had labels. There was a special trash can for stuff that had to be shredded, and another trash can for stuff that didn't have to be shredded, and special shelves for the high security stuff. You have to keep it separate. You have to label it all. And then you have to have some way to declassify stuff when it is no longer sensitive. And your personnel all have to be trained what these labels mean, what you should do with it, or they will be putting stuff on the wrong shelf, putting stuff in the wrong trash can, and that will cause security breaches. So in the military, you have top secret, secret, confidential, and unclassified. Businesses typically have like confidential, sensitive, and public, that sort of thing. You have some kind of system. And then you have roles. Your senior managers here, and now the senior manager is responsible for the security of the organization. So for example, there was a famous breach caused by a content management system, Equifax. Equifax had a breach because they had not updated one of their web properties. And they then tried to say, oh, it was this guy that didn't put the patch on. And I say, well, that's true, but it's also the manager that didn't make sure people put the patch on. The manager is responsible for what really happens. And if your staff does something stupid, you can say, well, my staff is an idiot. And they say, well, why did you hire idiots and not train them and not supervise them? The manager is ultimately responsible for the end results. Now, here's a question. Do disaster recovery plans include specific clauses for recovering data? Yes. The part of your disaster recovery plan will explain how to recover data, and it will include how to handle the different classifications. It will have to. How are you going to back it up? How are you going to recover it and maintain the classification? That would be part of it. Anyway, so you got security professionals that write the policies, and then you have a data owner. The data owner is responsible for classifying the information, and then they hand it off to a custodian who actually does the work, which is here. But the data owner is the one responsible for it. This particular distinction was difficult for me. I remember I had to go over and over it, trying to get it right for the CISSP exam. So a user is anybody with access to the system, and then you have an auditor. And by the way, another certification that's very good to get is the CISA. The CISSP is for security management, but the CISA is just for auditors. It's about half of a CISSP, and then you can become an auditor who audits compliance. You check a company to see if these things are right, and you have the authority to make everybody submit reports and install software to monitor what they're doing and all that, so you can create an audit compliance report. It shows I have these documents which prove that we are in fact encrypting everything we should encrypt and logging who uses it and making sure that only the right people are getting at it. And therefore we have achieved PCI compliance or HIPAA compliance. Everybody needs one of these people. And that's the auditor. All right. So we'll look at 1C, which is here. Oh. All right. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. All right, I guess that's it. All right, so which one of these is useful for a year? Okay, that's your tactical plan. Good. All right, who's responsible for the security of an organization? The manager at the top. Like the captain of a ship, they're responsible for what really happens on there, even if they didn't do it personally. All right. Who makes backups? All right, the custodian actually does the work. These other people are supervising and verifying that the work is done correctly and deciding what should be done, but the custodian actually does the work. Who produces compliance reports? Okay, and that's the auditor. By the way, someone, Michael commented, the janitor, you know, I actually had this discussion with the person that cleans the city college buildings, and he told me, we are not janitors, we are custodians. He said, our number one role here is actually not cleaning, it's safety. And we also do cleaning, but our main concern is to make sure the doors are locked and there's no slippery stuff on the stairs and things like that. He said, that's what we're really here for, because we are custodians, maintaining custody of the building, not just janitors cleaning it, which helps me pass the CISSP. Anyway, so King will have to tell me who they are if they want their points. CT has won twice, but I still don't know who they are. And Roman, that sounds like it's probably a real name. You can send your name in the chat if you want. Anyway. All right. So I think that's enough. We'll do the rest of this chapter next time. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll stick around to answer questions.